on TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV.
Already wasting more than 26,000 shifts and costing the taxpayer at least £25 million so far. So, surely, it's got to be something to be intervened, isn't it? We can't carry on like this. We've got our panel with us in the studio tonight, Special Projects Editor at The Spectator, Ben Lazarus, journalist and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, and barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. It seems to me as well that these are no longer simply protests. They're not simply demonstrations,
They are intimidation.
They are deliberate intimidation.
Yes.
They are dangerous for people, not for perhaps for all people, but for a lot of people. And they are very expensive. And surely the police must now do something.
Oh, absolutely. And they say it's the biggest period of sustained pressure on the Met since the Olympics 2012.
Right.
If you look at the cost, you talked about 25 million. I think it's close to 30 million, according to some reports.
Yeah.
What happened, actually, in 2019, the police were able to get some money back from football clubs, for example, about 5.5 million. I think we should look at that. So whilst there's a right for everybody to protest, there's a cost element to this.
Right. Who are you going to bill, though?
Well, maybe some of the organisers.
Send a bill to Hamas in Qatar?
Well, some of the organisers and so on.
They've got plenty of money.
If they've got some sort of responsibility. But the other thing is we've got laws in place, as we've always said on this show. There are laws in place. They're just not being enforced, and that's wrong.
It is totally wrong. It's
But
just
if any of
there's
us
sort of
tried
flash
to
mobs
shut down
now.
Tower Bridge, we would be arrested.
Absolutely.
Just without question.
But the police seem to be scared to enforce the law, and that's the problem.
On one side.
That's the problem.
Not
They
on
are.
both sides.
No, that is the problem. It's unfair and it's not sustainable. Definitely not sustainable. But anyway, listen. Coming up next, an ex-cabinet minister calls for MPs to go back to COVID-style conditions and work from home. Plus, the divide deepens as Tory MP Lee Anderson holds talks with rivals Reform. You're watching The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Stay exactly where you are.
This is Talk TV.
Welcome back. Labour MP Harriet Harman has suggested MPs who feel vulnerable should be able to work from home. Known as the mother of the House of Commons, Harman made the comments in a bid to protect MPs' personal safety amid growing concerns that threats and intimidation is impacting the members' way of life and the way that they vote. This comes as Lee Anderson stood by his position and refused to apologise again to Sadiq Khan after claiming Islamists have control over the mayor. The panel's still here with me, so, I mean, we have to talk about Harriet Harman. I'm slightly disturbed that since the events of last week, that the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, and now Harriet Harman, are suggesting that they should change their behaviour inside the House of Commons in order to appease the baying mob of pro-Palestinians outside. Yeah. Well, I think they might have to be a bit careful, actually, because if they do start, issuing these kind of orders and saying, well, we're all in danger, so we're not going to leave the House. So what are everybody else supposed to do? I mean, some of them have got bodyguards, we understand now.
Well, they have drivers and personal security
and they can get that. But none of the rest of us can.
But the rest of us don't,
No, it's absolutely important that anybody should fear for their life whilst doing their job, and I think that's a big issue. The scandal, and it was a scandal about the Just Stop Hoyle last week, and the fiasco that we saw. But bearing in mind, obviously, it was party political based. What the SNP wanted to do was to show up the division in the Labour Party. That was the whole idea of that sort of
but this is not because of that, though. This is because of what was happening outside. This was because they were feeling
and
threatened.
Things like Annalisa Dodds being sort of followed out of a constituency event last, the she Labour chant.
Yes, she was Treasury, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. And I can't remember what
I don't know why, because she can't add up, but that's not.
I was at university with her.
Well, there you go.
I just can't remember what she does now. But anyway, shadow something. And she was followed and, needed police escort basically home.
Right.
I mean, that is absolutely just not acceptable.
Because this intimidation will eventually lead to something much worse, it seems to me.
Well, we've seen it before with David Amos.
Right. Exactly. But, I mean, it's not acceptable, I don't think. You've spoken about this, Emma, before. I know that, what used to be a relatively civilised country is becoming less civilised as the days pass. Yeah, really and it's one thing to get up at Speaker's Corner and make a name for yourself and start saying things that might be considered a bit inflammatory, but to follow people around and to go to their houses and to threaten them,
But again, we should enforce the rules which were in place.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to happen, because otherwise, as you're right, it's going to escalate.
You're right.
And we've already had...
But we've been saying this since
murders and things like
October,
that.
and now it has escalated.
But also, people have been quite open. Just Stop Oil last week was saying, we are going to occupy MPs' homes. I mean, whether they can or not, and hopefully there is enough protection in, you know, so that they won't endanger people. But the idea that you can threaten
but they think
to
that's
occupy
acceptable.
their home, their families,
Yeah.
you know, their children who live in those homes, that they think that they're allowed to get away with that, Mike. That's what staggers me. Yeah.
Well, that's the time to step in. As soon as the threat is, they arrest them at that stage.
Yeah, but that's the issue. We've sort of created a two-tier policing system, which has then meant that people feel like they can behave with impunity and do what they like.
And a lot of that has
accuse
to do
people
with
of bloody genocide.
Right.
They're calling MPs, you know, that you are...
Well, look at the people that were outside Tobias Ellwood's house. You know, he's got young kids inside the house. It's disgraceful. And then, of course, you get the judiciary, who, once you get the characters to court from Just Stop Oil, they then let them go on the grounds that they believe what they're doing is a good thing.
Whereas, as you say, if Tommy Robinson shows his face anywhere in public, or a football, you know, football crowd, they're on the pavement, having their, you know, necks
having their rights taken away.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Lee Anderson, because he's still managing to make the news pretty much by hour. He's given a couple of interviews, and he's continuing to give interviews to say that he's going to not say sorry. Supposedly having had a meeting with Richard Tice at Reform. I don't think everybody at Reform is all that keen to have him on board, from what I can gather.
It might be a bit of a personality clash. I think we were talking about, just in the break, that Tice had referred to him as a pound shop Nigel Farage before. That said, with the Tories in disarray, Reform... You know,
politicians have got very thin skins and very thick skins when they wish to have them.
Yes,
so,
and
Richard Tice, I'm sure, is a big enough boy. He can handle that if he wants him on board.
Yes. And they could do with the, you know, it's sort of, it's not a star signing, but it's sort of probably good publicity for them. There's probably a good audience for it. So,
well, he could do that thing which I hate when MPs do it and decide to suddenly be an MP for Reform without actually having a by-election. Right. He could do that, because that's the first chance they'd have of getting an MP, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. An interesting move. And he's deliberately not apologising. You have to ask why.
Yeah.
Is that to appeal to certain people within the electorate?
Well, I don't...
No, I thought, actually, his statement... Sorry, Mark.
I was going to say, I mean, I actually took my hat off to him for not apologising, because I'm sick to death of politicians saying things and then saying, oh, sorry, I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
Which is what we saw Paul Scully do today. After saying there's no-go areas, he's now saying he's sorry he said it. Yeah. Well, why'd you say it then?
Yeah, exactly. He's
Although
not sorry.
We could have done with Ed Davey apologising, couldn't we, for the actual post office
Because,
scandal?
I mean, no, because in the end it doesn't mean anything.
But it was such weasel words. He said it in 10 different ways. I'm sorry for what happened. You know, it's the non-apology project.
But so often it's the case they're sorry they've been found out. Right. Not sorry for the initial thing. So you're right, a bit of honesty about it. He's not sorry he said it at all.
No, but I thought that Lee Anderson's statement was actually quite interesting and quite measured, and he was explaining, he was clarifying what he was trying to say. He acknowledged that his words were clumsy. Yeah. And I think we can all see that what he said was wrong about directly aligning Sadiq Khan with Islamists and with extremism. That was wrong. Yeah. But I think he made a very, very powerful point about what is happening to our capital city, which is what we've been talking about this evening.
And when he clarified,
who live and work in this place.
And when he clarified what he was talking about,
he did.
and then he then brought the police into it, he was right about that, because the police have been forced to get rid of some of the advisors they brought in, who were from Muslim communities, who it turned out had sort of some very dodgy connections with some extremist groups, and some of them had been filmed shouting from the river to the sea, you know, which they've now more or less decriminalised.
Yeah, there was a terrific Saturday when the police, the Metropolitan Police Twitter account was sort of like tweeting out an explainer on a protester who was calling for jihad.
Yeah.
And they were explaining that it was part of like a spiritual journey rather than...
They understood, and they had special interpreters who had interpreted it in this instance. They understood that jihad was meant in a peaceful sense.
Yeah, peaceful spiritual journey.
No, and this is what I mean when I'm sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek saying they've got a special unit that just makes things look legal, which are not legal, in the same way that they did another explainer about the Hamas flag. When somebody had what looked like an ISIS flag, and they said, oh, that's actually not quite an ISIS flag. You know, it's black, it has got Arabic writing on it, but it's not actually saying the things that the ISIS... And you go, come on, the guy's waving a flag which looks like an ISIS flag. He's doing it for a reason, the same way people are wearing Hamas headbands.
Paragliders on their jumpers.
They're not just, you know, like super fans of Hamas. their supporters.
But once they feel they can get away with that on the streets and the police are turning a blind eye and almost encouraging it, then the next step to harassing an MP is not a massive jump.
No, because they'll go, well, we've got right on our side because they think they're right and they can get away with it.
So why do you think the popularity of Sadiq is increasing? Because if you look at the polls...
I'd like to answer you, but I haven't got time.
OK.
I'll come back to that. You're watching The Independent Republic of Mike Graham. After the break, Post Office execs are grilled by MPs who actually came to work, and the BBC apologises to the family at the centre of the Huw Edwards scandal. Stay exactly where you are.
And scandal after scandal, it's not doing the BBC any good as it approaches 2027 and the renewal of the Royal Charter. And what's the Royal Charter? It's its licence to carry on broadcasting.
Exactly right. Michael, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed, as ever, for talking to us. The panel is back with me. I mean, the big question for a lot of people today in the result of this inquiry is how much longer is Huw Edwards going to be in receipt of his money? We all might feel sorry for him and we might feel that, it's unfortunate that he can't come back to work, which is what it's looking like. But he's on like $500,000 a year. Yeah. And he hasn't worked since last July. Yeah. So how long do you keep him on? By the way, talking of the Director General who used to sell Coca-Cola for a living, the woman in charge of all this, BBC's Chief Operating Officer, Lee Tabaziza, used to be Customer Relations Officer at British Gas.
There you go.
And then she's in charge of the BBC.
Absolutely astonishing.
What's going on?
That it took 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Such serious allegations. And the BBC are saying, we get lots of these kind of, totally unfounded, spurious kind of claims all the time. No, we're talking about the top presenter, and also we're talking about, the highest paid news presenter at the corporation. And we're also talking about the family of the young person involved.
Yes.
Contacting them with specific and very, very serious concerns.
Yes.
The fact that, look, we live in an era of email. This isn't as though someone went into a regional office up in wherever and they just didn't talk to the right person. It's an email chain. We live in a culture of HR, of safeguarding. We know that this kind of thing needs to be either addressed or, someone needs to contact the person involved or the family involved.
And that's the biggest question.
That it took 7 weeks and seems to have sort of fallen down.
And it only really came out in public because the Sun ran the story.
Exactly, because the family, in desperation, got no response from the BBC and then went to the paper.
And what the BBC said at the time is they get hundreds of complaints, which is why it sort of got lost. But the spotlight needs to be shone on why they have this particular process, why it took so long.
They claim they're going to improve the process now, and they're going to speed it up. But again...
Well, how many times has this happened over the years,
and that's the problem. You talked about the scandals.
Well, there are so many names, aren't there?
Which part of Jimmy Savile do they not remember? Surely after Jimmy Savile, they have to be on heightened alert to present it.
And certainly people did discuss, didn't they, at the time, that, the BBC was a place where you were not encouraged if you were, say, a young production assistant or a young journalist to make any kind of comment whatsoever about the talent. You couldn't say anything about it. You couldn't even dream of criticising something because it was clear that there was quite a lot of other people who had been affected by some of Huw Edwards' activities,
And that there was a lot of fear around that presenter specifically, actually. And not being able to, the feeling that you couldn't challenge that
absolutely
behaviour.
It begs into question. I interviewed Greg Dyke for the Royal Television Society. We talked to Tim Davie as well about the whole process. And all of this, they always sort of say trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback.
Yeah.
And if there's ever been a time where trust in the BBC has been at an all-time low, it's because scandal upon scandal, and it's about
the last
processes.
12 months, Ben, have been pretty horrific, haven't they, for the BBC? I can't think of one positive. I mean, when I was talking earlier, you've got the whole, anti-Israel bias. You've got Jeremy Bowen, the Middle East correspondent, claiming that the Israelis had blown up a hospital and then later saying that it was wrong to say it, but that he didn't regret getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And then only this week we had the BBC leaving out the rather important information about that horrible trans cat killer who happened to be transgender. They referred to the killer as a woman. Deliberately misleading the public.
Yes, and as your previous guest said, I mean, the Bashir stuff is still going on in the background.
List goes on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, the strange thing with Huw Edwards is, if I remember correctly, wasn't it Victoria Derbyshire? Sort of her programme was investigating allegations against him already before the story was released.
Off.
Yeah. So the BBC don't come out of this well at all.
No.
As you say, the Sun's pretty vindicated.
Well, the Sun actually have got a spread in front of me in tomorrow's paper, pages 4 and 5, which suggests to me it might be on the front of the paper as well. 9 months to say sorry, it's ripped our family apart. And that's from the mother of the young teenager who's at the centre of these claims, who was basically paid, let's not forget, 35,000 quid for a series of pictures and explicit images over 3 years. I mean, it's not as if it was, you know, I made a mistake, I did something stupid. 3 years it went on, £35,000.
You know, you remember the Philip Schofield case?
Yeah.
And there are questions, and we don't know everything, do we? But there are, you know, suggestions that they were in a relationship.
Yeah.
This is different. When you are paying someone, paying them for cash to send you sexual pictures, and they are 17 years old, probably younger actually at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I do think that someone of Huw Edwards' intelligence, and there's nothing to do with his sexuality, whatever gender, we're not talking about that specifically.
Not at all.
But you do know what you are doing is possibly not good, and you also are aware that you're a presenter at the BBC and that you have a, you know, position.
And as many people have said as well, you know, you look back, and I don't know if the BBC have even resolved this particular problem, but when you look back to various important events that Huw Edwards was the go-to guy for, you're going to have to hear his voice. You know, his career may be over at the BBC, but there's an awful lot of footage which is archived.
Many royal
which
events.
you can't really redo. I mean, I don't know what you do about that.
Well, yes, you can redo it with technology, but you're right.
Well,
the
no,
reality
you could.
is,
But you can't. I mean, the BBC could they, put out, you know, the footage of, say, you know, the Queen's death with somebody else's voice?
No, they shouldn't. I mean, they can technically, but
I think
the
that
reality
feels like,
is exactly
for many people, that feels very, very disrespectful, because he did break that news.
Well, he was the voice of the BBC. He was the voice, as you say, for these historic moments.
But now you find yourself thinking, what was he doing while he was doing that? You know, because the stories that were being told at the time of his behaviour were quite shocking.
Well, and there's two separate things, isn't there? One, the unwise but not illegal, so sort of rings in everybody's ears for a different sort of case. But this is about the whole process. What happens in the BBC? Have they improved these sort of complaints procedure as a result? Because time and time again, there's yet another case and so on and so forth. And as I say, that's what's happened. You're looking at these sort of things. Have they handled it in the appropriate way? What lessons have been learned? And so far, we need to get clarity on that sort of
And how can you defend continuing someone's salary at that level when it's a publicly funded corporation? And also, I mean, either they need to make a decision and sack him or keep him on. But at the moment, they seem to be in this kind of stasis where he just keeps getting...
It would depend on his contract as well. So you don't know if it's...
I'm pretty sure you could get gross misconduct out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems unthinkable.
Well, you would in any other company, wouldn't you?
It seems unthinkable we'll see him on our screens again. I mean,
I don't think there's anyone that would suggest that he's coming back. I think almost everyone says that's not going to happen.
So then the question is why are they still paying him for?
Well, they'll have some obsession about duty of care. He's still
all that sort of thing.
So we're paying for it. It's tax.
Exactly. Listen, you don't get an argument with me. I'm just telling you what they would say, which is that if he's still receiving treatment for some kind of mental health issue, they might feel it's premature to get rid of him. But they'll have to bite the bullet at some point. You know, what if he continues to say he's in need of mental health treatment for another 10 years?
We need clarity on this. You're
going to make, you know, £5 million quid?
Yeah.
I don't think people would want that.
And also, I can't get over that it took 9 months for them to reach this conclusion.
Yeah.
You think this could have all been wrapped up and sort of buried.
Well, this is the thing about these reports. They take so long.
I know.
I mean, look at the different reports that the police are doing.
Right. I mean, look at the COVID inquiry. How many years is that going to be? The cost of these things is eye-watering.
It really is. And, you know, the SNP up in Scotland, the police investigating them. How long is that going to take? You know, that's been going for a long time. Anyway, let's talk about something slightly less contentious. Peppa Pig apparently is ruining children's lives in America. I've lived in America, and I can tell you their lives have been ruined by... No, but there's also... Their lives are not being ruined by Peppa Pig. Their lives might be being ruined by their obsession with guns. They might be ruined by their obsession with fast food. They might be ruined by their obsession with driving cars everywhere. I mean, also, there are some terrible things happening in America. I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of Peppa Pig. I don't know whether you watch it. I know you said earlier that you don't really watch TV very much at all. None of my kids were ever particularly into Peppa Pig.
I saw the birth of Peppa Pig down in Cannes. I go down to the TV festivals there.
Do you?
I do all the time.
How
I present down there and things like that. The reality is, it was there. It was launched one particular Contender, I think, with the company before it was bought by E, and it was brilliant. And it was there, and all of a sudden, and we remember good old Boris Johnson going to Peppa Pig World and extolling the virtues of that. But to complain about the British accent, this is one of the things they say, is that as a result, lots of people in America are now speaking with a British accent. We have the best accent in the world. world.
I don't think
they said it's
be...
making kids bossy and bratty and sort of, and that George and Peppa are liars.
Before English kids were like
it's
that.
It's actually quite sweet. It's not. It is, and it's nice because it's multi-layered. So children just love it because it's fun and it's Peppa Pig. That for adults, you can see the layers. You know, the fact that there's this passive-aggressive thing between the mummies and the daddies.
None of my kids have ever.
Maybe it was a little bit before.
Not
I don't
really.
know how long's it been around.
Not really. We've got Boris Johnson talking about it there.
Here we go.
Yesterday I went, as we all must, to Peppa Pig World. I don't know if you've been to Peppa Pig World. Hands up anyone who's been to Peppa Pig World? Not enough. It's fantastic. I was a bit hazy what I would find at Peppa Pig World, but I loved it. And Peppa Pig World is very much my kind of place.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really knows why he did that still.
That was weird. Well, yeah, but he's being Boris. He's just... because he's at some very random conference.
He
was.
Says, CBI.
You know...
It was CBI. But he lost his way. You might remember, oh, forgive me. And so he
looked as though he had lost his way, but I wonder whether he had...
he writes his notes. He writes a speech in the cab on the way there. He's absolutely kind of... So he'll have just kind of...
And it was a glorious avalanche of alliteration. But Peppa Pig is actually owned by an American company now, so it wasn't the best of British, which is what he was extolling. But you look at the American cartoons, we were discussing some of this, and what's going... absolutely comes... The humour there is extraordinary on multi-levels and as well.
Yeah, I think South Park's far better than Peppa Pig, in my opinion. But, you know,
it is.
In that case, I suppose we could complain that our children would have American accents. But I mean, I grew up watching things like Starsky and Hutch, you know, the Partridge Family and stuff.
We love the Partridge Family.
Yeah, so I mean...
John Boy, the Waltons.
Yeah, but I didn't end up having an American accent as a result of that. But I did get a slight American accent.
Most Americans would die to have an English accent.
They
if those parents are genuinely... I mean, mums get together on these groups. I think Peppa Pig... But if they're genuinely complaining about their children having English accents, they're lying.
Do you remember when Madonna came over to marry Guy Ritchie and to live in Wiltshire? And she developed this very...
full-on tweed.
Yeah,
it was very weird.
She had a very weird period where she started talking like some kind of, you know, character out of Downton Abbey who was visiting
like
from New York, you know, and going down the local pub and having half a pint and trying to make out that she was British.
They do that. You know. So embarrassing. Yeah. Buying a huge stately pile with their dollars.
I mean, I lived in... my wife was American and we moved to Wiltshire and... everybody in the village knew that she was American because she was constantly shouting, you know, because that's what they do. They're quite loud. And also every workman within about a sort of 30-mile radius used to turn up knowing that they'd be able to charge her 300 quid to do something, you know, lopping trees, you know, sorting out the whatever it was. Yeah, so Americans are very much in love with Britain. I'm surprised they've suddenly turned on Peppa Pig.
I find it extraordinary because they do. Every time you go to America, say every time, they always want you to order several times because they love the British accent. Yeah. So to have these little children growing up with the British accent has got to be good.
You would think.
Yeah.
That's enough bashing of Peppa Pig. I don't know if we can bother to be talking about the Willy Wonka Glasgow event refunds, but we'll come back to that. You're watching the Independent Republican Mike Graham. Stay tuned for this one because MPs and industry chiefs have warned that new government net zero proposals could see you hit by a £1 billion toaster tax.
The world of woke.
So the panel is still with me. See, that's another mad story from Net Zero. Unintended consequences of saying if you bought, for example, any kind of item from Boots, say you bought, I don't know, a curling iron or something, you could make them come and take away your old washing machine. And they're going to go, well, I'll tell you what, we're not going to sell the curling iron then.
Well, we have such a problem with this. So much stuff is kind of, you can't ever fix it. Something goes wrong with your washing machine. Oh, no, you know, it's completely redundant. You can't change that part. You want to chuck it out and buy another one, love. Right. So then you're basically putting a washing machine that's 1 year old, 2 years old in landfill.
Yeah.
What we need to do is make things fixable. In the old days, you used to be able to open your hairdryer, put in a new fuse, and then put it back together. Right. Now you chuck it in the bin. But now they'll charge you sort of 200 quid to fix it. Yeah, you can buy a new one for 250, right?
Yeah, so and that's the problem. Everything is disposable on that point of view. So it's got to go somewhere. The cost is going to filter down, and that's the result of sort of knock-on effect. Yeah. But crazy.
Exactly right. Right, let's talk about some of the stories in the papers. Where's William? We haven't really touched on the royal family yet. Yeah. We were talking earlier to Michael Cole. But it is, I mean, I don't know if you share initially I was like, you know, it's not our business. Let's not look into any of this too much. However, there's a sort of happy medium, I think. And now because of what happened today with William saying that he had some personal matter, which I know a lot of people have said could be anything.
Right.
But it's a bit odd, isn't
it? It's the point you made before, isn't it? You sort of turn around. If you're going to be so public about some of it, then all of a sudden you're going to speculate. So that we've been told it's not to do with the death of the unfortunate thing. It's not to do with Kate. So the question is, well, what is it?
I mean, funnily enough, it's women that are asking me the questions about Kate because, you know, we know that there are certain operations that you can have, but they tell me, well, you know, I had a friend that this happened to, but she was back driving a car after 2 weeks. And, you know, all sorts of suggestions that, you know, this length of time is unusual. At the very least.
I've been hearing other things about Kate as well today, and I think there's so much. I veer between feeling that this is, come on, it could be he's got a runny tummy, he pulled out very last minute.
But wouldn't you
His
just say
name
you had a
was
stomach
already
bug
printed.
or something?
Yes.
Exactly. Wouldn't, but and they are entitled, as you and Michael both saying, they are entitled to their privacy, and we would all expect our privacy, but we are also entitled to know if there is something going on. It's so difficult.
And also there is a lot going on in the royal family.
Yes.
On top of it all, this terrible discovery of the young guy, 45 years old, you know, dead. It's awful.
But to be fair, did we know in the first place that William was going to go? So why? So the story sort of broke that he was going to go, but now he's not.
Well, actually, apparently it's a long-term engagement, so it was obvious.
But his name was on the order of service. He was going to give the eulogy for his godfather.
Yes.
And he sort of made himself the story by, you know...
Right. I mean, the other sort of side issue about the story is, and I don't know if you saw the actual footage, but Prince Andrew and his former wife Fergie appear to be sort of at the front,
quite at the front
of the royal group,
and they're allowed to
walking
go
around
to these family events, aren't they?
Which just feels.
It's extraordinary. And again, Fergie's
and he's looking very pleased with himself.
He's looking very pleased, grinning because he's back in front and centre. And so Fergie's been brought out after all this time.
Yeah.
She spoke about her own cancer issues.
Right.
And I think you're right. You're putting the spotlight, and the question has to be, why is this being done in this way?
And I think there'll be people. There it is. That's what you can see there as he's walking down, looking very pleased with himself. I mean, certainly we talked about America. I mean, their attitudes to the royal family, they'll be looking at this because they don't have the same, you know, standoffishness that we have. They'll be going, what's going on?
Yes.
You know, is there some kind of curse? You know, why? You know, they'll be writing that story.
And it's personal
to
say, to release it as it's personal matters.
Yeah.
Immediately begs the question, well, what is it?
Yeah.
Even though he is entitled to a personal life.
I mean, it could be something to do with one of his kids. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
but it's just odd.
But talking about an enlarged prostate is personal, and this is why we're going to go down that route.
Yeah.
You need to turn around and say, you either have transparency...
Yeah, you can't go halfway.
There's been a change of tone.
And it's what you said about commenting about...
But this is what I was saying about Prince William the other day
Exactly.
and his pronunciation about Gaza.
Yeah.
You know, because suddenly when there's something else terrible that happens in the world, we'll need to hear from Prince William.
Yes.
Yeah, well, otherwise he doesn't care about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the danger of becoming suddenly an ordinary member of
why are we not
the
being told that?
commentariat. You know, if he wants to have a TV show, come and work at Talk TV. You know, you can't be the heir to the throne and do that.
I think it was, though, assumed that it would be to do with the death of Tom Kingston, but then actually his
They've
parents
sort of hinted
were there.
it's not that.
His
Well, they've
parents-in-law...
said very specifically it's not.
His parents-in-law were at the ceremony today.
Yeah. Interesting. Another sort of royal connected story, Royal Marine amputee Ben McBean. He was on Talk TV earlier today with Kevin O'Sullivan and Alex Phillips.
Yes.
He was hailed by Prince Harry as a real hero. He lost an arm and a leg in Afghanistan. They've since fallen out because he has said a few things that Harry didn't like about the fact that he was kind of dissing his time in the armed forces.
Yes.
But the remarkable story here is that he's an ex-commando. He would have had a priority parking disabled sticker, which was needed to be renewed. They haven't renewed it. They've refused to give it to him on the grounds that he's not disabled enough. And you see the picture of him. He's clearly disabled.
Well, the reason they took it away, so he used to have one. They say they took it away after he ran in the marathon with a prosthetic leg.
Right.
And so that's what they cite as the reason. But as he says, look, how disabled do I have to be?
Right.
He ran in the marathon because he's an absolute blooming warrior. Isn't he? He's an amazing guy. And I was just saying, I saw someone the other day in a car park getting out of their vehicle with a blue badge, a disabled badge, clearly not disabled. And I know not all disabilities are visible, but this man was physically very, very able, sprinted out of his car, sprinted into the shop.
You see that a lot.
With his disabled badge.
You do see that a lot. And they have now issued, like all these things that we look at every single day, they have issued more disabled badges, I think, than ever in the last 24 months.
And it's always somebody's mum, and they're doing the shopping for their mum who's disabled or whatever. But then to take it away from a real hero.
You need clarity. What he said, there's so many boxes, he didn't quite tick the right boxes and therefore didn't get
ridiculous,
it.
Isn't it?
It is ridiculous. And so what you need to do is have that
two
clarity and
limbs.
community.
He's got one arm and one leg.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he was saying, when he was talking to Kevin and Alex today, he said that he particularly needed a sticker at the moment because he's broken his ankle. And he said, it's the only one I've got.
Right.
And you kind of go, it's amazing, you know.
And you'd think the council would be able to sort of give him a, you know, have just apologised and given him a badge.
You would think
but
so.
But in this, it says, you know, they want to speak to him personally.
Yeah, we can't comment on individual cases. I mean, do me a favour.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Just get on
He's
with
in
it.
the sun, right? He's on telly.
The Cabinet Office are saying that they're looking at the situation, being probed by officials.
Send him a badge.
God help us.
Exactly.
£16 for a pack of cigarettes.
This is really
on the front
depressing.
page of Metro.
Really funny.
Also in the Sun as well. The price of a packet of 20 cigarettes, it's going to hit £16. Thank God I gave up, is all I can say.
Yes,
apparently, this is Jeremy Hunt's plan to launch a budget war on smoking and vaping.
Well, I mean, all it's going to do is just encourage people to buy cigarettes abroad. I mean, when I...
Well, also black market cigarettes, which come from abroad.
But when I used to smoke, I would just go and get cartons of cigarettes from wherever I was on holiday.
Yeah.
And that was when... It was probably about £10.
It was actually, in those days, it was worth getting a £20 EasyJet flight, wasn't it?
Yeah,
to some foreign place. Just buy loads of cigarettes, come back, and you made £100.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the other thing as well, though, they're all saying that he may not have any room at all to play around in the budget. Maybe this is the way of getting some extra money in so he can give it away somewhere else. Because people are sort of looking at that.
I mean...
What makes me laugh is that you would have... I was a smoker as well. You were a smoker. We were smokers. You would have paid that. Like, even then, cigarettes costing £5 for 20, and then they went up to £6, and it always just seemed... But you carried on. This is why drug addicts are addicted to drugs. You carried on paying, and now £16
I mean, I gave up in 2017,
laughable.
and I think they were 12 or 13 quid then.
I gave up in 2007 when they brought in that horrible
I think they were already around 12, 13 pounds when I was smoking.
That is a lot of money for 20 cigarettes.
When I worked out, it was costing me
when people ask you for a
£5,000 a year.
cigarette, that's already like, well, give me £1 then.
Yeah, I stopped giving them away. I was
exactly.
Like, that's up to you.
I don't know what this war on smokers is really all about. I mean...
Well, to get money.
Yeah, you know, obviously we have this stuff about trying to stop young people smoking, but actually... We should really be wanting people to smoke because we want people to die younger.
Exactly.
They spend...
See, that is a very good point. Yeah, very good point. Guys, we've got to go. Thank you so much. Fantastic stuff. You've been watching Independent Republic and Mike Graham. Thanks to everybody. See you tomorrow at 8 p.m.